Thank you. Thank you, young adults. We're super excited about what God is doing there and super excited for what is next. Well, they say that the road from Jerusalem down to Jericho is like a snake. It twists and winds, and there are cracks and crevices and little hidey holes. And when you're traveling along this curving, narrow road, you're not always very safe. And they say that when you're traveling, you really shouldn't linger. That you need to keep your head up and your eyes open. You need to look all around you and pay attention to what's going on. There are robbers, there are bandits, there are gangs that are out there, and so you got to keep your eyes open. This is where all the local crime happens. And so as I was going down this road, when I saw this body lying there, half dead, on the side of the road. Well, wait, just a minute. Let me back up. Let me tell you first, my name is Sam. Sam. And after this whole thing happened, I got the whole big picture of this story. I found the entire story. So let me back up and tell you what was happening before I came on the scene of the crime. It went like this. This man, the one that I eventually found, this man was traveling down this very road, this road with a reputation. It's kind of like there's this road in Grand Rapids, this like Main Street like division. It kind of has a reputation, kind of like that. And even though this wasn't a safe road, the man was traveling down it, and it was the only way to get from Jerusalem to Jericho, so he was just minding his own business. He's doing his own thing. And he got jumped. And it was bad. It was bad. They took his shoes, they took his hoodie, they took his wallet. No phone, no money, no nothing. And they beat him up pretty bad. They beat him so bad, in fact, that he couldn't walk away. He was just like there on the side of the road, couldn't even walk away. Just left him bleeding in the ditch. And as he was lying there, a little later, a priest came by. Now, it's pretty common for priests to travel this road from Jerusalem down to Jericho because Jerusalem is where the temple was, and it was where the priests did their work. And a lot of priests and Levites and other religious leaders lived in Jericho. So it was kind of like they'd travel back and forth along this famously bad road. A lot of them would go back and forth. So that when they'd be on duty at the temple, they'd do their temple thing, and then they'd go home to Jericho. So they'd go back and forth quite a bit. So our beat-up friend, he's lying here, he's in the ditch, and he sees the priest coming, and he's thinking, oh, good, there's like a person who loves God here. I'm going to get some help. But what happens is this priest takes a look at him, averts his eyes, and then crosses to the other side of the road, going on like the guy was invisible. Now, here's the crazy thing. Now, I'm not a Jew, so these aren't my Jewish laws, but I know about some of the Jewish laws. Their law has rules about helping people. In fact, their law specifically had rules about when they should and when they shouldn't help people, and what that should and shouldn't look like. And so they had a law about, like, priests aren't allowed to touch a dead body. Now, it's true that my friend looked dead. It was probably hard to tell if he was actually dead or not, but priests weren't allowed to touch a dead body because it made them unclean, ceremonially unclean to work in the temple. And if they became unclean, then they couldn't work in the temple for a while. And so that would kind of make sense if the priest was just walking by and he's like, oh, I'm like on my way to the temple to do my job and I can't get messed up. Except for the fact that the priest was going from Jerusalem to Jericho. He was leaving Jerusalem. So he didn't really need to stay ceremonially clean. So I was thinking about that. But more, and I'm not an expert in Jewish law, but more than that, I hear it said that the Jews' law says that when you come across a corpse, priests are expected to bury a corpse. So that at that point, then they do touch the dead body, but they have to bury it. If it's a dead body, they have to do that if no one else is doing it. And that the laws are supposed to be broken if it's a matter of life and death or it's a matter of giving dignity to a dead body. And so this whole passing by thing seemed really fishy to me. Well, then my friend tells me what happens next. Priest goes on, friend's still lying there, still in the ditch. And this Levite comes by. Now here's what you need to know about Levites. Levites are religious helpers. They're the ones who help the priests. So they do the dirty work. They do the things like cleaning up all of the animal sacrifices. After we do the animal sacrifices, they clean up the blood, they clean up the mess, they clean up the parts that are left there. They already are used to doing dirty work. And it would have made a lot of sense for a Levite to come along and, help this man who's all bloodied and who definitely needed somebody who was willing to do some dirty work. But guess what this Levite did? He does the same thing. He looks at the guy, and then he turns his head away and goes past. And that's about the time that Sam, came along on this road. And as I was coming, I'm riding my donkey, doing my donkey thing on this famously bad road, and I know there are a lot of unsavory characters around, so I am watching. I've got my eyes open. I am watching. Every time we come around a new curve, I'm just watching, waiting. I'm on guard. And I was coming from Jerusalem, not because I had religious duties there, because I'm not a Jew. I'm not doing any of that sort of stuff. But I went there to buy, sell, trade, and so I'm carrying valuables with me. Besides my donkey, which is valuable, I've got my oil, I've got my wine, I've got money. These are things that I am trading and selling. And so I'm traveling with my goods. Really, really, really don't want to get jumped here. And while I'm glad to bring home the bacon, I really hate traveling the road with that stuff just because it's just not safe. So when I saw this beat-up guy lying in the ditch, my first thought was not, how can I help? My first thought was, what if this is a setup? What if this isn't safe? What if this is a trap? What if the bandits are still close and maybe they're going to jump me if I stop and help this guy? And then my second thought wasn't really much better than that. My second thought was, this guy's not a Samaritan like me. And not only do I not really want to help this particular person, but he wouldn't probably help me if I was dying, because our people don't do that. Him and me, we're not the same. And you might not know this, but Jews and Samaritans, there's a whole lot of bad blood between us. Bad blood. His people and my people, we don't work. They call us heretics. We call them bigots. There are decades of fights and gang wars and vandalism, like decades. We don't like each other. They've treated me bad. And I've been treated bad by people who look just like this guy. And on top of that, I'm wondering if he even would want my help, would even want me to touch him, to help him. All these things are swirling in my head, and I'm thinking about the expensive oil and wine that I'm carrying, thinking about all the goods that I'm trying to protect. I'm wondering if I'm safe. I'm wondering if this is just a setup. There's my good old donkey who's right here, and I'm wondering, should I stop here at the scene of the crime and risk my own safety, or should I just ride on? I had a choice to make. So I sat there on my donkey for a sec. And that's when I saw him. I mean, I already looked at him. I don't just mean look, like the priest and the Levite looked at him. They looked at him, but I saw him. I didn't see a Jew or a Samaritan. I saw a human. And in that moment, something grew in me. The Greeks have a word in their language for it. It's called splanchnizomai. And it means to be moved in your guts. The splanchnizomai, it means to feel it in your gut, to have a deep gut level feeling. You might call it pity. You might call it compassion. But it's when your guts get moved. It literally comes from the word for internal organs or bowels, because in ancient Greek, the guts were seen as the seat of the emotions, this gut level mercy that I felt for this human that was right here. And I found myself asking the question, what if that were me? So, looked behind me, looked around, listened for any other noises. Then I secured my money belt, and with one more glance over my shoulder, I got off my donkey. And that gut level compassion took some gut level courage. The kind of courage that moves through fear, not around it. Because it took some guts for me to walk over to that man that I didn't know, not knowing if he was an imposter, not knowing if he was going to welcome my presence. It took some guts to kneel down and to touch him in all of his filth and blood and mess. It took some guts to take my oil and put it on his wounded body parts to soften the hardened wounds. And the wine that I use as an antiseptic. It took guts to spend my precious oil and wine on a man who might hate me, on a man who might not get better. And it took guts to get involved when it would have been safer and a whole lot easier and a lot faster to just move on. But as the Jews' prophet Isaiah says, I went and I bound up the brokenhearted. I applied the oil of joy instead of mourning, and a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. I suppose at that point, after I'd made him more comfortable and given him an opportunity to heal, I suppose at that point I probably could have just left him there. He would have probably gotten better enough that someone else could have come along and helped him. I mean, he was a lot better off by that point. But I didn't. I put him on my own donkey. And while he was there, I walked and he rode until we came to an inn. So I went up to the innkeeper, got to the inn, gave it to the innkeeper. I said, "Hey, innkeeper, I'm gonna pay you in advance for a few days. I've got to go on. I've got to keep on doing my business here, but I'm gonna pay you in advance for this man and just make sure that he doesn't need anything. And when I pass through again, you keep track of if there's any additional expenses and let me know, and then I'll pay you for whatever is left." Now, I knew I wasn't going to see that money again. I knew this man might never thank me, and I knew the innkeeper thought I was probably a fool. But the innkeeper was also out to make a buck, so he accepted my 2 denarii, which was 2 days of my wages, 2 days of full work. 2 days of work. And it paid for 2 weeks for this guy to stay here. And I said, "All right, I'll be back. Keep a tab." Luke 10, verses 30 through 35. Today we are in week 2 of our Breaking and Entering series. This study that is a study of the parables of Jesus, a study that's a celebration of 20 years of City Life ministry. It's a study that talks about these parables of Jesus, about the kingdom of God breaking in on earth as it is in heaven. We're going to look at different parables each week and what it teaches us about how God's kingdom works, how God's kingdom breaks in, and what God's kingdom is doing in this world. The mission of City Life is to manifest God's kingdom now on earth as it is in heaven, to manifest God's kingdom now. So what does that look like? Backing up to another story, this would have been a little over 20 years ago when Adam and I were getting ready to plant City Life Church. And early on in our call, Adam is never afraid of anything. I mean, he probably is. He's like strong and all there. But I got things I had to work through when we were first getting started. I felt confirmed in our call to urban church planting, but it was still early on in that process, and I hadn't yet figured out about how I really felt about living in an urban neighborhood. And I'm not proud of my fears. I had some fears that were based on unfair assumptions. I had some fears that were based on fair assumptions, documented crime and things like that. I had fears that were economically driven. We knew that we were doing something that was financially risky, something like less than 1 in 3 urban church plants make it past 5 years. When a neighbor threatened Adam's life, a few months into our move into Grand Rapids, I felt afraid about that. I felt uncomfortable by the way that men catcalled if I went for a walk by myself in the neighborhood. I was afraid of things. But I was wrestling with God on this, and I was wrestling with the obedience that God was asking from me. I was doing it, but I just wanted a greater sense of confidence in what God was doing. And one day I was praying about it. If you don't pray about your problems, you really should, because often God gives answers. And one day as I was praying about this, I had a lightning clear thought come to me. All the things that I was afraid of, the bad things happening, Adam getting hurt, me being left alone, me getting hurt, things going bad, running out of money, church not working. All these things that I was afraid of were evil things, sinful, wrong, bad things that the enemy could do to me. And I found myself asking the question, why as a child of God was I living my life bound up in fear of what Satan can do? What if my only fear was if I disobeyed God? What if I changed my fear from, instead of being focused on bad things that the devil could do, what if I changed my fear from that to a holy fear of God, God, may I do nothing except what you call me to do? What if my only fear was an awesome fear of a holy God who needs to be listened to and trusted and followed completely? What if my only fear was the fear of an awesome God who is so amazing and so righteous and pure and good, and my only fear would be that I wouldn't live for him? And I realized in that moment that I was bound up by fear of the wrong things. And I was more afraid of the things of the enemy than I was of having a holy fear of God. That was a moment when the whole thing shifted for me, when I shifted from faithless caution to an all-in courage. Church, we are living in a world today where we still have people who are in a ditch on the side of the road. Our community gives us that look up close and personal. People are still being left for dead on the side of Division Avenue. I mean Jerusalem to Jericho. People are physically suffering in our community. But people are also still being left for dead spiritually in our community. Others are dying around us all the time as well, drifting away. And we find it so easy to walk by, to not really see, not really, and to let people keep on going without the hope of Jesus. And I think that Jesus is saying to us in this parable that it is a crime that the man got beat up. But maybe the real crime is that there were people who had the answers, but they passed by. And then this story goes on to tell how God just uses whoever he can get. This Samaritan wasn't even the right person to help the man who was beat up. But God uses who he can get. And over in Scripture, over and over, we see that God uses the unpopular, the outsider, the less qualified, the person you'd least expect. But it's the person who's bold enough to do what God wants. Samaritan was not only not uniquely qualified to help this guy, someone could say he was less qualified to help this guy, but he was willing, and so God used him. And one of the things that I want all of us to know at City Life is you don't have to be uniquely qualified in any sort of special way for God to use you in a mighty way. You can be ununiquely qualified. You do not have to be an expert on things. What you do need to be is obedient and bold, courageous, willing to say yes to whatever God asks of you. In a sense, our whole world is a crime scene. Sin is in this world. Sometimes the enemy gets his way. We're waiting for the day when everything is ultimately made right by Jesus. People get beaten up, messed up, and thrown away on the side of the road. The priest and the Levite should have helped. They know the law. The Samaritan shouldn't have helped because he's the outsider. But when Jesus is in the picture, Jesus flips the script. And what was up is down, what was down is up, because the kingdom of God surprises over and over again. See, when Jesus came to earth, there was a different kind of break-in. The kingdom of God breaking into this earth in the form of a rag-wrapped baby in an animal feeding stall. Jesus broke in to the scene of the crime. He didn't cross over to the other side of the road. He didn't pass by. He didn't avert his eyes. He saw us. And through his coming to earth as a human, to his sacrificial death on the cross, to his resurrection that overcame the power of sin and death, Jesus was at the scene of the crime. He descended into our suffering. He cleaned out our wounds. He comforted us and healed our pain. And even today, he is binding up the brokenhearted, proclaiming freedom for captives, release from darkness. He brought his favor. He brought his justice and his vengeance. He brought his comfort to comfort all who mourn. He brought oil of joy and garments of praise instead of a spirit of despair. That is the kingdom of God breaking through in this world. That's what happens when Jesus breaks in. I love the courage that this Samaritan is practicing. And my longing for us as a church is that we, in this 20th year anniversary, as we're celebrating what God has done, my prayer for us is that we will be in a place of renewing our courageous conviction to say, whatever you call me to, Jesus, I say yes. Jesus, if you call me to something big, I say yes. Jesus, if you call me to something small, I say yes. Jesus, when I am afraid, I say yes. Jesus, when I have reasons for why it's not logical for me to be sold all out to you, I'm going to say yes anyway. May we be bold and courageous. Look at some of the things that the Samaritan does that are courageous. The courageous conviction, number one, he has the courage to see. He has the courage to see. It says, the Samaritan, as he traveled, came to where the man was, and when he saw him, the priest saw him, the Levite saw him, but the Samaritan sees him. Open your eyes. Ask the Lord, give me eyes to see what you see, Jesus. Give me eyes to understand what you see, to see the invisible. We've, panhandlers, people who are panhandling for money, many will tell you that it's not really a glorious thing to do. It's not really a glorious way to spend your time standing there on the side of the road with a sign asking for money. And many will tell you that the worst of it is simply that people don't look at you. I've heard people say, even if people don't give me money, it's fine. They don't have to give me money, but just they don't look at me. They act like I'm invisible, like I'm not there. And I've heard people say, like, simply a hello, a nod, even if you don't give me anything. A hello, a nod, acknowledging that I'm a human being, seeing me matters. It says that the Samaritan in verse 33 then took pity on the man. And I think another area of courage that sometimes we need, and some of us maybe need it more than others, is the courage to feel. The courage to be vulnerable, to have feelings, to love. I was, my change happened, I don't even know, probably would have been 10, 15 years ago now at City Life. And I grew up as a pastor's kid, and I've been in ministry even before coming to City Life, and so been in ministry long enough to know that sometimes you get hurt and like people walk away, and you kind of just have to like steel your heart because you got to keep on going, and you just kind of like, you put up a wall to kind of just to protect yourself from getting hurt. And so that's kind of how I functioned. But there was a woman at City Life who was always telling people that she loved them. And so she would come up to me and she'd say, love you, Pastor Christy. And I'd be like, I love you too. I'd say it to her, because she was saying it first. So, love you, Pastor Christy. But then she'd say to other people, love you, so-and-so. Love you, so-and-so. And I always thought it was kind of cute and kind of funny. But then one day, I was talking with another ministry leader at another church, and I heard the person saying how much they disliked their congregation. How we just weren't the same kind of people, and we just don't have anything in common. It's really just kind of hard being there. And I found myself thinking, I don't want to become that ever. And what would it look like if I let that shell of protection crack a little? And if I started to let my heart be touched with the love that I genuinely had for people, but if I just let myself feel it? Something changed that day. And since that time, I will tell people that I love them. Since that time, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to love you. And if you hurt me, you hurt me. But I'm going to love you anyway. For some of us, that takes more courage than others. And some of you might be there. An opening of yourself to say, I'm going to let myself care. I'm going to let myself feel. Courage feels, compassion is costly. A third thing that the Samaritan does in verse 34, as he's traveling along, he sees the guy on the side of the road, he takes pity on him, and then it says in verse 34, he went to him. The man had courage, number 3, to get off his donkey. To get off of his comfort zone and get off his donkey and go to where he needed to go. Now, some of you need courage to get off your donkey. I had an interesting conversation with 2 city life leaders just the last couple weeks. And one of them was saying, yeah, I'm having a birthday party for my child here at the church. And another one was saying, yeah, and they're saying, but some of our friends were like, well, we don't want to go to that church because it's like dangerous down there in Division. And then the other leader said, yeah, I don't even bother inviting some of my group of friends here because like there is no way, like they will not come here. And I found myself just thinking about how those sorts of things impact us. You don't have this problem because you're here, so obviously you found a way to make your way here and have the courage to show up at 574 Division Avenue. But we have other areas of comfort zones, don't we? We have other donkeys that we're sitting on that are keeping us safe and removed and protected. What comfort zone is keeping you from that next thing that God's calling you to do? Maybe you need to get off your donkey. So we went to him, verse 34, and it says, and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Now, I used to think of like doctors and nurses as having this like glorious medical kind of career. And it was a few years ago I thought, actually, they do a lot of gross things. Like they deal with people's blood and bodily fluids and things that are kind of yucky. But isn't that what the work of healing is? Isn't that the work? Getting a little dirty. Point number 4 is the Samaritan, he had courage to do dirty work. He had courage to get his hands dirty. He probably didn't have latex gloves on him. But to heal, he had to get dirty. And church, we as people of God, as Christians, we are agents of God's kingdom healing in this world. That doesn't mean we get to be in some antiseptic, sterilized place. It means we're doing field work. And we're going out there, and there's blood, and there's bruises, and there's brokenness. But because we carry hope, we go to where people are. We go toward the wounded. We don't hold back, we push through. We have courage to do hard things. And the story then continues with, then he put the man on his own donkey, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper. Look after him, he said, and when I return, I'll reimburse you for any extra expense you may have. Number 5, he had courage to sacrifice what he could have kept. He could have easily kept what he had, but he had courage to sacrifice it. Courage to give. Some of you do this regularly. Some of you have embraced a call to have courage to live on less. To say, I don't need what I could have, and I'm choosing to live on less. Some of you are living on less not by choice, but you're saying, I'm courageously choosing to trust God with everything I have. This is a parable about courageous compassion, about a breaking in of thieves and robbers, and the breaking in of a person who brought hope and healing. I've got one more story for you today. And it's not a story about traveling down a road and being attacked by a gang. It is a story about Adam and me being in our own house and being attacked by a gang in our old house. Some of you have heard this before, but it's been a while, so I wanted to share this. But it was we were 8 months in to planning city life. It was about 11:15 p.m. on a Tuesday night. We moved into our neighborhood. Our children hadn't yet been born, and that would be something that we would eventually be very thankful for. And as we were getting ready to go to bed, we just turned out the lights. We started to hear shattering glass. Now, that wasn't particularly unusual. We heard shattering glass pretty regularly. We had a pretty high crime neighborhood. And so we heard the breaking of glass, and we thought, oh, that's, we're hearing that. And then we realized, oh, that's actually really loud. That must be right out the window. And then we realized, no, that's not just out the window. That's actually our house, like downstairs. That's our glass in our house that's being broken. And so we sprang out of bed, threw our clothes on, and ran to the phone. We have 2 staircases. We have an old house. So we have like a main staircase and then a little staircase. And at this point, we had some not so great interactions with neighbors who knew that we were Christians and who knew that we weren't like super excited about the crack deals that were happening across the street and from us. And so we knew we weren't particularly popular. The police mobile unit had just moved in at the end of the street. There was a lot, people thought we were police, like there's a lot going on. And so we're like, are we being targeted? Like what's going on here? But meanwhile, we're upstairs on the phone, hearing glass shattering, wondering if people are going to come up the 2 sides of the stairs and surround us. And so Adam says, quick, Christy, get the baseball bat. And so I go to the closet, and there's no baseball bat. They're down in the downstairs closet, because we always used them when we were downstairs doing stuff. We didn't expect to be trapped upstairs, so we had no baseball bats. The only thing I could find was 2 racquetball rackets. So I gave him one, because that's what came to my hands, and he's looking at me like, what? But he's on the phone with 911. There's so much noise. Loud noises. Shattering glass, loud noises, just loud noise everywhere. This is all going on. Adam gives me the phone. I stay on the phone. He runs to the back window that looks over out the bathroom that looks out to the backyard of the house. And he sees, he goes to the front of the house. He goes to the front of the house. He's looking at the window. He's yelling, get out of my house, get out of my house. I run to the back. I look in the backyard, and I count 15 people. And I can tell there are people inside the house. So then I tell the 911 person, I just counted 15 people, and can you please hurry? It's like there's people in the house, and there's like that many people outside the house. And they said, oh, there are that many people? Well, you're going to have to wait, because we're going to have to go get backup. I'm like, that's okay. We just need one gun is good right now. So we're in this moment. It seems to be lasting forever. And I'm standing at the top of the stairs on the phone, and I look down the stairs, and suddenly there's a person coming up the stairs. Adam's right there. I'm right here. I make eye contact with this guy. Adam's making eye contact with this guy. And as this young man is coming up the stairs, he's got bloody hands. He's holding on to the stairwell wall, leaving smears of blood along the walls as he comes up. And he's agitated, but he doesn't seem out of control. It was kind of weird. Agitated, but not like out of control. And I'm wondering in that moment, are we going to get shot? Are we going to get beat up? Are we going to get assaulted? Like, what's happening? And I'm standing there on the phone. I'm not even telling the 911 operator what's going on, because I'm completely frozen. There's flight freeze. I'm a freeze, so like completely useless in moments like this. And in that moment, Adam goes up to the guy, kind of grabs him on the shoulders and manhandles him back downstairs, kind of wrestling him down the stairs. And he went, and Adam was like, no, this is what we're doing right now, and pushes him down the stairs. The guy goes, and apparently there was some sort of conversation that happened, because the sounds began to settle, get quieter, the thumping, the pounding, the people got quieter and quieter. And then there was silence. And we looked at each other and we said, is it over? And in the next moment we heard, police, come down with your hands up. I'm like, you're like 30 seconds too late. So we come downstairs. And I went down the little tiny staircase that went into the kitchen. And I would later find out that both the front door and the back door had been torn off their hinges. A window had been smashed in our living room. The man's bloody handprints were all over the walls. And I came down to find that the kitchen was completely destroyed. I opened up the door to go into the kitchen. It was completely ruined. It was a pile of debris. The refrigerator had been opened up and thrown on top of a pile of rubble. There was food everywhere. A microwave had been thrown across the room. The table and chairs had been broken. The washing machine and dryer that were in there had been dented. The stove was broken. Everything was a disaster. Of the food, my two clearest memories are the jar of pickles and the pickle juice. I can still smell the pickle juice from the jar that had been smashed, and the coffee grounds that were everywhere. Those are my two smell memories from that moment. And I remember standing there in that kitchen doorway, unable to enter, just looking at the chaos that was this high, shaking. And I remember having a little trouble breathing as I'm looking at this kitchen. You're going to have to come back next week for part 2. Because that's only the beginning, and there's a lot more that happens. But it was a break-in that deeply shaped who we are. And the main reason why it shaped who we are was because of what happened next. In this dramatic moment, like a man lying by the side of the road that's overwhelming, that's paralyzing, in this dramatic moment, there is a Jesus moment for us. And while I was standing in that kitchen with the pickle juice and the coffee grounds, having trouble breathing and not thinking clearly, like my brain was going, in the midst of the chaos in my mind, there was a very clear message from the Lord. And as I looked over the chaos, I saw a little mini loaf of bread, about this big, that I had had on top of the refrigerator for communion for a small group the next day. And it was still in its bag, but it had been trampled, walked on. It was all ruined. And right next to it was the little mini bottle of grape juice, lying there on the floor, had been walked on. And Jesus said to me, my mind's swirling, I'm not thinking straight, clear as day. Jesus said, Christy, you and Adam were safe upstairs. I was here. I took it. I took this for you. I was keeping you safe. I was trampled underfoot. It was my blood that has been shed for you. I'm the one who's in this. I got you. In church, we do crazy things like say, Jesus, you can have it all. Jesus, I'll say yes to you. We do crazy things like saying, but I'm a Samaritan. I don't even go with those people. We do crazy things like stop on dangerous roads and dangerous places and say, you know what? I actually have hope and help to offer here. I've got the solution. I know the guy who's got the solution. I'm gonna offer it. We do these things because we have a Jesus who did it first. A Jesus who says, I got you. Follow me. I got you. Let's be sold out to Jesus. This is not a story about Adam's or my courage. This is not courage. This was like, it just happened. But then there was a choice on do we quit or do we keep going? And that's where the courage comes in. And you have a choice today. Will you keep saying yes? Will you quit or will you keep going? Jesus has made this life available to you. His broken body and his blood that was shed for you. Be bold, be courageous, and say yes to him over and over. Please stand. There's a gluten-free station in the back.